during the meantime between the licensing and the...
Well, I leave Mr. Gonod answer the question, and I will answer to another one. That we discussed a lot trust, credibility, and I want to just come back to the question or the remark of Claudio Pescatore on who knows and how do we know who knows what. And it is a very general issue. The fact that you have a contradiction between the condition of competence and the condition of independence. In many areas, those who are competent in an area are not independent because they are in the area. So it is the case for medical products and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of stories about that. So it is a major stake to organize that, and which relates to a huge investment in public expertise and in different ways of looking at the problem. I come back to the French trajectory, designing some institutions who are independent and who may have really public and independent expertise in the area was instrumental, and it is a baseline for creating trust. And you cannot expect that it will come naturally. So it is a major element in the dynamic of the issue.
Thank you. Per, you're of course also allowed to ask another question and answer it as a final remark. Please.
Well, a final remark which I really will bring with me from here, and that is related to the comment by Mr. Gonod here. Which really underlies what a bit of my argument here before, that I think from the perspective of the regulator, but also from the perspective of the industry and the public at large, all we individuals in society, I think it's of very great importance that we start to think about regulating the principles for the decision-making processes taking place during the operation of the final repository. I touched upon two questions in my presentation, the question of retrievability and the question of transfer of responsibility. If I look at the Swedish regulatory history, this has been touched upon ever since the 1970s. But in a very inconclusive manner. In the preparatory work for the Nuclear Activities Act, it is stated that in some way or the other, responsibility will be taken by the state, which anyhow has the final responsibility. Nothing about modalities, nothing about what does this responsibility really incur. And I think it's time for us to start a legal political debate concerning the principles for conducting the operation of the final repository. And this is a huge challenge.
Thank you. I think we go with Timo, and I will do the last one.
All right. First of all, about participation, just to mention that during the last 10 years, when we have made these governmental parliamentary decisions, we have seen, unfortunately, that the interest to participate becomes less and less. So that's one thing which our researchers probably know more in the other sessions. But then coming up to this 100 years, so already today we know that some power plants have a limited lifetime of 40 years, 50 years, 60 years or so. And there is already a kind of landmarks to those decisions, that how the responsibilities for these reactor owners and reactor spent fuel will be relieved once it's disposed of. There will be decision points on the way once the operation proceeds to its full extent. It might be 100 years or 200 years, who knows. But one thing is sure, that once the time comes for the final closure of the repository, then that group of people who are present at the time will decide upon it. And they most probably will not respect the decision of this committee here today which decided that the repository shall be sealed 2123. But they definitely will make their own decision based on the information which they have at that time.
Thank you. I was saying that committee will not consist of any of us here, in any case.
Oh no.
Yes, please.
Yes, very briefly, I also was to underline that there is, all the way up to final closure and deciding who is responsible for repository, there is a step in Sweden also stepwise decisions. We have to provide a new report before we are allowed to start construction. After licensing, we have to provide reports every 10 years about the safety and so on. But so that can be described as a stepwise decision procedure. But of course, one has to realize there are very big decisions that are difficult to go back from. Of course, when we start construction, when the municipalities have expressed their view in terms of their possibility to have a veto, once we have all those in place and we can go on with construction, you can hardly go back. So there is, for instance, the big decision for the municipalities and the big national decision is within a few years. Where to do this, how to do it, and let SKB start. We should remember that is a big decision. But then there will be control stations later. But the further you go, of course, the more effort to go back.
Thank you. Mr. Gunnou, you asked the question, and unfortunately I think you are the one that has to answer it, because they quite didn't...
Remember, I started with humility.
Yes.
And so I will be very modest at this time too. No, the most important is that in France we decided that we had a new law in 2016. That's mean before the license application. And this law will decide what's the legal process for the different step in the industrial life of the repository. But to conclude, the most important is that you understand that we are all working on these questions. We have the responsibility to ask these questions. We are not obliged to have the good answer right now for each country. But the most important is that all our countries are working together to this question, who are very, very important. And that's very important for people to understand that the cooperation between Andra, Posiva, SKB, and so many others is very, very important for each of us. We are not separated. We're not working each one on our side. Even if the laws are different, the situation is different, the geological material is different, and so on and so on. But we're working on the same question. And we have to have the good questions and eventually the good answers.
So thank you very much then for the panels. It has been an extremely interesting discussion, at least from my layman point of view, bridging eons and also important political and social and scientific issues, both when it comes to technology and social sciences. Do not leave. I have some practical information to all of you, but the panel is leaving, so please thank them. And Christina Wikström, I think you have some gifts for the panel even. Thank you very much. And before I leave you to lunch, let me just inform you about what will happen after lunch. There will be three parallel sessions on 3 different locations. The session 1, Lessons Learned from National and Local Experiences, will be here in the auditorium. And the session 2, which is Societal Aspects of Nuclear Waste Management. Since it's societal, we have placed it in the Socrates room. You remember that. Societal aspects in the Socrates room. And the third session, which is a special plenary session on methodology, is named Paradigms, Models and Methods in Risk Perception and Research will be in the Platon room. So paradigms in Platon and social preference in Socrates. And those two rooms, you know what the auditorium is, this is where you are right now. But the two other rooms are down the stairs, past the reception, down the stairs again, actually adjoined to the restaurant where we will have lunch. You will see that these are the two first rooms. So the Platon and Socrates is there. And before leaving you once again, I would also like to remind the speakers for the different sessions after lunch, including those special sessions in the Socrates and Platon room, and the keynote speakers afterwards, that I will have a speakers meeting with them at 13:10 hours, 20 minutes before the session.